types. The next one we're going to be doing is a gathering one. We're going to take the long piece of fabric and make it fit on the short piece of fabric. So how we're going to do that is to make this fabric bunch up, but we want it to bunch up evenly, so there's tricks you can do on the sewing machine to do that. We're going to put in 2 rows of temporary stitching, and in order to do that we're going to set our machine length to 4, or as long as we can, 4. And I'm going to put it in 2 rows. Now I don't want it on my stitching line or where I'm going to permanently sew the seam, so I'm going to sew 1 row on the 20 and 1 row on the 10 line. In order to do this successfully, I need to leave really long thread tails. So you just yank on your 2 threads, give yourself lots of tail. You're not going to backstitch, and the reason is we don't want this to stay in our sewing sample. We want it to be able to come out. So you're just going to sew all the way along. And when you get to the other end, you're going to pull it and leave a nice long thread tail. And I'm going to do my second row on the 10 line. And again, a nice long tail. So I've got these 2 rows of temporary stitches in there. You can already see it's trying to bunch up already. Now if I yanked on one of these tails hard enough, I would actually pull the stitching right out. So we need to prevent that from happening. So I take a straight pin and I put it in one end. Doesn't matter which end, whatever one you're more comfortable with. And you take all of your thread tails and you wrap it around like you're drawing figure 8s. So now I can pull all I want on these thread tails and it can't come out. I need to separate my top thread tails from my bottom. On this machine I was fortunate, and it was a happy fluke, that I have 2 different colors, so I can easily tell that my white one is my top thread and my red one is my bottom thread. For some reason the bobbin thread or the bottom thread works better for doing this. I don't know why, it just does. So what you're going to do after you've separated them is grab them, and you're just going to gently hold them and pull the fabric along. So as you can see, it's nicely gathering up. So if you ever have worn a baby doll top or something like that, this is the exact same method that is used to do that. So I'm just going to keep pulling this until this, well, I'm almost there, is the same size as my smaller piece of fabric. How am I doing? Pretty good. Okay, so now this fabric doesn't have any right side or wrong side, so it doesn't really matter. Once I have it the right size, I'm going to pin it in place, matching up those raw edges to the best of my ability. I'll do it the easier way. The easiest way to do this is to pin the 2 ends. You can see how nicely that sits on there. It's beautiful. Now I don't want all my gathers to sit in one spot. I want them to be evenly distributed. So now that I've got the ends pinned, I can move them along a bit so they look nice. There's a bit of a blob there. There we go. And then I'll just finish pinning it. And now that I'm pinned, I can undo this. I can actually just take that one out. I need to put in my permanent stitching. So I need to make sure I go back to 2.5 on my stitch length. This time I'm going to line up with the 15 line. Got a lot of threads hanging out here. 15 line. And like all the other samples, I'm going to start by putting my needle in, sew forward a bit, and then back stitch because I don't want this seam coming out. I'm going to take my pins out as I sew them. And I just stitch everything in place. And it seems a bit weird because it just looks funny because you're sewing over bumps and lumps and stuff, but that's what you're supposed to be doing. So don't worry about it too much. When you get to the other end, back stitch. Okay, so the permanent seam is now in. And as you can see, when you look from the right side, I've got all these nice gathers in there. But now I need these temporary threads to go away. And because I didn't backstitch, I can just pull them out. Okay, so the next step is to press and you're all done.